Welcome to another episode of the Golden Hour. I'm Sharif Yunus here with Dr. Kevin Majors. Kevin, thanks for coming back on.
Yeah, Sharif, it's great to be back.
Well, Kevin, I thought it would be great for us to discuss the question of email. This is something that I think everyone struggles with to a greater or lesser degree, and also one where a topic that Cal Newport recently wrote a book about, which I gather you've been reading.
Yeah, I just finished the book, and yeah, I there's a lot of interesting ideas in the topic of email, and I did not find in the book the what I would call the optimal work approach to email, but there were a lot of interesting ideas in it. And he's talking about the problem that happens in a lot of organizations of a way of working with email that he calls the hyperactive hive mind, which is that you're constantly pinging each other back and forth. And then things get lost in email chains. You have to go search for them. And email basically can create a lot of work and then obscure the real kind of thoughtful work that people enjoy doing and actually do better. So it's like the question is to what extent the book is called A World Without Email. And he admits at the end, it could have been called maybe better or a world with less email. So just because getting rid of email isn't the goal of the book, and maybe someone had suggested that to him. But there's something
It wouldn't
striking
sell as
about the
many
idea.
copies. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he also had written an article that got named "How Email May Be Making Us Stupid." So I think that was in Chronicles of Higher Education. So there's this idea that email may not be bringing out the best in us. I think everyone could say that, okay, there must be a lot of truth to that. Yeah. And so trying to like separate, he says, the real work of production, that whatever is the valuable part of your job, and cordon off times, you could say, when you're just doing that. Uh, he actually does know. I've talked to him about golden hours, I believe. I think because we've met and spoken and exchanged ideas over a long time, and he probably it's the idea of make sure that you have protected times of work. He wrote the book Deep Work, which is kind of on that topic. Oh, that's more about doing deep dives into work for hours or days at a time. A golden hour is 90 minutes, maybe max, where you're just setting aside time that you craft in advance. And I think that you want to make sure that email doesn't lessen the quality of those. And Cal would agree with that totally. Um, he also thinks that email is its own kind of work, like support work for your main mission. And so I think that it's a helpful way of thinking of it. Just how to treat email like part of your job, like part of the work. Um, anyway, so that's like the big overview of his approach in the book, I would say.
Now, it seems to be unhealthy that people are checking email every 2 to 6 minutes.
Yes,
So it
he
kind of
says
has a
that. Yeah.
special pull on our attention. I even find that as soon as I, get to a break between golden hours, my instinct is check my email. I can almost, I actually have observed my hand on its own just moving to my pocket to reach for my
I,
phone to check the email, and I have to stop it. Um,
yeah,
but
it's so easy
so
to keep checking all the time.
yeah. So do you have a sense of kind of what's at the essence of the problems with email? I think there are many different things we could point to. The inefficiencies, maybe the draw on our attention, the fact that it breaks up uh, potentially longer periods of work, the fact that maybe it's like you said, it's support work. It's not the essential work for many people. Sometimes it is maybe in a more customer service oriented role. Email actually is essential, but for many people, like analysts or researchers, email is a support function. It's not what they would consider the core of their work. So the question for you is, Kevin, do you have a sense of the essential kind of essence of the problem with email?
If I were to put it in two topics, I would think that we talk about a lot that relate very strongly to email. The first is threat mode, and then the second is vicious cycles. So the threat mode, because when we go and check our email, we're like on alert because anything could come at us. Yeah, it could be a new demand from a from a boss. It could be some shifting in a deadline, or it could be something that's going to require a lot of perhaps effort from us. So it's natural, I think, when we are receiving emails to be a little bit in threat mode because who knows what is going to come. There's another issue of threat mode, which is that there are all of these social expectations mixed in with email. And so if someone sends you an email, there is an absolute expectation that you're going to read the whole thing. And sometimes people send very long emails. Yeah, but the expectation is you will read the whole thing. So you're a bit of a captive audience when you receive an email. Yeah, if it's coming to you personally, the expectation is you're going to read everything that's there. And if there are any attachments, that you're going to look at those too. And then there's also an expectation of a response. And the response you would normally think should mirror what was sent. So if you get sent a 3-page email, the person, if you send them a one-line response, it's going to be kind of rude. And so just whenever we receive emails, especially when they require a response, we go a little more into threat mode because now there's someone potentially disappointed with our performance. And there's a bond that could be on the line. Like you didn't know that this bond with the old friend was at risk until the friend emails you and the clock is ticking and they're waiting for a response. And now it feels like there's a big risk there. So I think that's the dynamic of email is that it can be fraught with threats. None of those threats, I think, have to be real. They can all be managed. And we can talk about how to be managing them. But that's just the reality of it. That when you receive someone is making a demand on your time and attention, and they expect you to read it and they expect you to respond. One of the then how this lends itself to a vicious cycle is that one, email is asynchronous. That's just that you can send it and it's waiting there, and then someone later in time goes and checks it. That's different than, say, a phone call, which has to be, of course, synchronous. So now you're talking to each other and you have each other's time. Well, phone calls, in a sense, have a virtue because how synchronous they are. That means the effort is symmetrical. That the amount of minutes you put into the phone call equals the amount of minutes I put in the phone call. When you have asynchronous communication, I think that introduces the way to more asymmetry in effort because it's very easy for someone to send you a quick email that literally would have taken them 10 seconds to write. And then you think of like your response might take a half hour if you're going to do a thoughtful response to it. So there is this way in email that um, you might be expecting, without really realizing you're doing it, something really big from the other person. A very thoughtful, perhaps a lengthy response is kind of expected, but email lends itself to that in a way that ordinary communication doesn't. And there's also the fact that you could send someone an email, at 5 p.m., but then let's say he or she reads it at 8 p.m. and they're at home with their family, and now they feel they have to respond and they can't sleep well tonight unless they respond to your email. And so there's another kind of problem with asynchrony is that people end up feeling like they have to check email all night long. And it's the first thing they often check in the morning. It's the last thing they do at night. It's like they're just keeping up tending to this email. But all has to do with that there's something about email that lends itself to kind of vicious cycles of escalating expectations. You expect a lot of the other person, and even at times when you shouldn't be expecting it. And so people get caught in this trap, the hyperactive hive mind, of just sending quick emails back and forth, huge email chains, and then expecting responses even in the evening. So that's where you can feel trapped by email.
Yeah, how does this relate to the kind of setting appropriate priorities in work? I know that emails maybe weigh on me in a way that is disproportional to how important they actually are, whereas some other tasks just don't feel as concrete, so they don't weigh on me, although they are more important. So in some way, I need to step back and think, okay, what are really my important responsibilities? What are the best things for me to be doing? What matters the most for, in this case, the success of optimal work and the growth of us and users? But email just kind of grabs me and pulls. So and then I know this can also happen not just at the individual level, but at the team level. That email can just kind of take on a life of its own with very long email threads, and it takes people's focus away from what matters. So, how does the email relate to maybe the larger problem of goal setting or aiming at effective outcome?
Yeah, I think this is a really crucial question, because having, high goals in your work, really thinking about what does it look like for you to get better at what you do, for you to advance in what you do. If you're in charge of a company, for the company to advance in what it does and the service it provides, all of that should be very deeply motivating, because that should be touching into your core ideals and the kind of service you want to provide and the way you most love serving people. And if people are in touch, I would say, with their core ideals and the kind of a sense of mission in their work and what they are wanting to do, they are um, less prone to the problems with email. And that's because email is always low hanging fruit of almost immediate getting something done. Like, okay, I'll get that done. Okay, I'll get that done. And in a way, that gives you a little bit of satisfaction, but it's a kind of negative satisfaction. It's like just the relief from a pain. That having the unanswered email weighs on our social brain like a bit of pain. And so you get a little bit of relief from that pain when you get that email off your plate. But again, that's in a sense the low hanging fruit. That's not the real deep source of motivation and joy. But having a mission that you really are connected to, having work that you find meaningful, learning, like we were talking about last time, how to put love into your work and what you're doing, all of that is very deeply motivating. So, on the one hand, the better we are practiced at crafting our work, shaping it, and orienting it toward higher ideals, the more a sense of meaning and purpose we have. And then I think it's easy to fit in email in the sides, alongside it, while the core golden hours of the day go to what matters most. And so often we recommend people to do a brief check of email to make sure there's nothing urgent. Should someone inappropriately send an urgent matter through email, because that's not a very kind thing to do. Uh, and make sure there's nothing urgent. And then otherwise, you do it perhaps if you're going to have like a 90-minute run, when you in your first time at the office, then you take a break. You could have then 20 minutes, let's say, of just dealing with email, and then clear your mind and do another 90-minute run. Or you could just wait until right before the next meal, like before lunch, and then check email then. And then having like a system for how you check in. Often for students, what I'd always recommend is just check email before lunch and before dinner. And you can set aside 30 minutes and you just treat it like work. You turn it into crafted work. And this is the thing. I almost the sense, with in the Cal Newport book is that email is like a necessary evil. I actually just think of email as a very simple form of work. It's work that has a lot of potential social threat in it, because you feel like you have to respond, you have to do it well. There's all these expectations. So I think that's why email feels bad to people, because there's all these expectations wrapped in it. A lot of that is an illusion. You just want to do good work, just to have nice, simple replies. And so if you just treat email like something, a nice task that you're going to craft, then that like opens it up to feeling much better. And so it's not necessarily the email itself is even the problem, even though it does have this thing where um, constantly different topics might be hitting us. I think that in general, as long as you cordon off times to deal with email and you just encapsulate it in a certain time, it doesn't have to be bad at all. because you're communicating with people and you're talking to people and you can be friendly, you can put your best self in it. So email doesn't have to bring out the worst in you, but you do want to then have it crafted in a certain times. The hard thing with email is, let's say you're working on something and then you realize, oh, I need those numbers from this one thing. Oh, that was in an email chain. And then you go and you open up your email and then you get bombarded with 10 other ideas and you get distracted by it in the midst of your work. That's what we don't want to happen. So you want to do all that you can to minimize that kind of the destruction of good work by email dissipation. That's what we want to avoid. But email itself is just work. Just cordon off in the little simple times. Do it then, and just find out for your schedule then what's the best way of interfacing with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and another point I would make also about the interaction between work and email is that sometimes an over reliance on email can indicate a lack of planning in the work. That if you think you're blocked by that you need someone else's help urgently to resolve a roadblock in your own work, well, maybe it's something that could have been thought of in advance.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think people save a lot of time if they found ways of improving their workflow, which Calnuport's really big into. Things like Trello and Flow and these, personal Kanban boards or shared Kanban boards that allow you to, if you're going to have a conversation with someone on a certain topic in your work, it shouldn't be constant back and forth by email. Find another way of doing that together. It could be a Google Doc that you're sharing where you're working on something, but that way all the conversation is just captured in one spot. So I would say if people, that's like a big topic of what are all the options out there for getting communication out of email. Because the back and forth communication, email is not designed for it. Email is for brief exchanges where you don't need, I think where you don't want there to be an expectation of, immediate reply, and and you don't want it to be a blockage in a workflow until the email is responded to. So if in your job there's a total blockage in workflow until you respond to an email, well, that's going to raise the threat level for everyone, and that needs to be addressed on like an organizational level.
Yeah, I found it's especially good for just notifying people of things. Hey, just
Hmm.
want to let you know I just finished this, or just want to let you know this person reached out to me. So it's not you're not expecting a reply. You're just letting someone know, and they can look at it in their own time, and there's no exchange necessary.
Yeah,
Um,
and
but
that's
now,
such a great
oh
point,
yeah.
Shreve, that you're kind of getting at, which is what are the expectations that we have when we email
Mhm.
others?
Yeah, that was exactly what I wanted to get into next. We've talked so far about how to handle the kind of deluge of emails coming in and how to work that to be effective in spite of it or because of it, through it. But now, yeah, maybe we could get into the question of how do we send emails in the best possible way. So, kind of now going from the passive challenge of having all these emails to now the active challenge of okay, now I'm crafting an email, and here really there's an opportunity for ideals to shape our actions. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
Exactly. No, I think it's good that we realize, that when we are sending someone an email, especially if it's out of the blue, that uh, this is a chance for us to connect and bond with the other person more. We tend to go into a left brained, just get things done, and it's all transactional. And it's like, I have this need, please meet it. And it's a wonderful thing. And I get to email with a lot of wonderful people, where there's an emphasis in that, and actually at first just the bond, and an expression of concern or remembering something in that person's life. But if you can build the bond, and like always put that first when you're dealing with others, not just what can they do with you, but some kind of friendliness needs to go into the email, I think. So it's clear that you are happy to be talking to them, in a sense. Not, and again, it doesn't have to take a long time, but just to make sure that there's a sense there of that you're prioritizing the person and you're dealing with another person and you're not just treating them like some kind of Siri on the other line waiting to, carry out your commands. Um, and that gets into this idea of just like sincerely putting people first. over projects. And every time you send an email is a chance to do that. Um, another thing is being able to be more aware of the demands on the other person's attention that you're placing there. And this is where people can really learn to become thoughtful. And it's um, for instance, a good length, like limit for an email is probably something like 5 sentences. Cal mentions that in his book, as a way of responding faster to people. But it's not just a way of responding faster. I think it's a way of like whenever we're emailing each other, making it being really thoughtful about the other person's attention. How much of their attention are you demanding? Just being aware, like the other person, you are they're when they get your email, they're going to feel an obligation to read the whole thing thoughtfully. So keeping that as much as you can to like a very minimum. But that sense of like being aware of the other person's attention and trying to protect it, I think that's a wonderful way of just being humble in how we are dealing with others. And finally, I would say that you want to make the other person's job when they reply as easy as possible. And that's just being kind and generous. So, like, trying to make sure that when you are crafting an email, that one, try if you ever can to make a reply not necessary. So, the thing you mentioned earlier about notifying people, email is great for notifying people. And many times that is the best way to do it. You just send a brief notification of something. If they want to do something with it, you leave that up to them. You've given them the option. Now your email has actually done something for them, given them an option that maybe they want to exercise, but not to put all the burden on them to do the hard work and thinking. So whatever you can do, make it very easy for them. Um, it's an example is like setting up a meeting. Well, if it's just with another person, you can use Calendly or something, or you just offer them several times. That could work, so they can just choose that one and it's easy. If it's a bunch of people, you use a doodle poll, and doodle will help you to find the time. Anyway, the idea is when you're emailing others, try to make it as easy as possible for them to respond or not respond. If we all did our part in lessening these expectations, we would get along better and we would work better.
Yeah, another one could be if you don't know what to do and you want to ask someone who's more knowledgeable, you could say, I've been thinking about trying this, this, and this. Which do you think would be the most effective avenue for me to pursue now? So it's not like the other person has to think about it for an hour and even try out things on their own and see what's going to work and then basically do the work for you. But it's okay. I'll put a little bit of output thought into where to go next.
Exactly. And if you're just like thoughtful, like you never would want to ask a person a question by email that you could have just Googled and gotten the answers. Like that's putting the burden on them to do the Google search, and that can happen quite often.
Well, great, Kevin. I think this is great because as we were thinking through, what is optimal work applied to email? I think it's very easy to think of, okay, how do I manage the work of responding to email? But I really think optimal work for email is how do I apply sincerity, humility, and generosity to crafting good emails that make other people's lives much more pleasant and just to put it in a little bit of context, Kevin, sincerity, humility, generosity, it's reframing mindfulness challenge, but applied specifically to relationships. Is that a good way of putting it?
Exactly. Our bonds with others. Yeah. And
Mhm.
we could say that that way you get the golden rule of email, which is email others the way you would want to be emailed.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Kevin, I think that's a great note to end on. So,
Thanks,
unless you have
Sharif.
any, do you have any final words or?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, the golden rule covers it. Great.
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll be back next week.